happened. Mark Rogers TV looking at the ACC and a pretty good one here with Miami hosting Clemson. Of course, the Tigers are looking down the road at Florida State, but first need to get by a Canes team that is underachieved, but at the same time, that one effort at Tallahassee was pretty impressive. They led Florida State late in that game, had the ball in their hands to take the lead and try to win it again late before Brad Kaaya and the offense could not get the job done. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to help us out on this one. And the star powers typically at quarterback, Mike, but especially in this one with Deshaun Watson and Brad Kaaya. And on a few podcasts we've done in the past, I had a pretty good argument with some other people involved on who might be the best quarterback in the ACC, but it's kind of tough to go against Deshaun Watson right now.
Yeah, especially coming off of that game last weekend against Boston College. I mean, everybody talks about how good Boston College's defense has been this year, and rightfully so. They're the best defense in college football statistically to date. But Deshaun Watson, man, he comes into that game last weekend, throws for 420 yards and 3 touchdown passes. He did throw 2 interceptions in that game, but he was pretty impressive, and he's a guy that provides that dual threat, both throwing the football and rushing the football, something that Brad Kaaya doesn't necessarily provide. And that's the reason why a lot of people, including myself, prefer Deshaun Watson to Brad Kaaya. Not to take away from Brad Kaaya. We'll get into him more in a second. But Deshaun Watson has been extremely impressive, and so is this Clemson team. Watson's thrown for over 1,400 yards this season and 14 touchdown passes. Their closest call probably came against Louisville, a game where Watson did not play up to his potential, and the Clemson offense was not very good in that game against a Louisville team that was really, really struggling in that point in time. They've struggled all year, but they were at the lowest of the low at that point in time, and Clemson was able to eke one out there on the road in a very tough game on a Thursday night. So Clemson, that was Clemson's probably toughest game to date. Notre Dame gave him a run there late in the fourth quarter. That's a game that Clemson was able to dominate for 3 quarters against the Irish. So best quality of opponent to date, probably Notre Dame. Toughest game was probably against Louisville. And Clemson, the way they played, putting up 34 points against a very good Boston College defense last week, and gives them a ton of positive momentum heading into this matchup against Miami.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson broke onto the scene and was known on the national radar even coming out of high school because of his great athleticism and talent. One of the things that impressed me, though, last year is that the kid threw 14 touchdowns and 2 picks. He was extremely impressive and efficient and like a 68% passer, which you almost never see out of a freshman quarterback, able to make the right reads and deliver the ball on time and on target. And even though he got nicked up throughout the season and kept coming back off injury until he was finally hurt and knocked out for the rest of the season, he came back and played again very efficiently despite being nicked up. 68%, 14-2. Now he's thrown more picks this year at 7 than what he had last year of the 2 interceptions as noted. Wayne Gallman's not necessarily a running back that is on the radar like most of the big teams have, the Derrick Henrys, the Ezekiel Elliott's, Leonard Fournette's, and so forth that are competing for national championships, and of course Dalvin Cook right here in the ACC. But Gallman, a pretty good back that's been productive here for a few years for the Tigers.
Yeah, they're not afraid to give him the football either. He already has over 100 carries this year, 584 yards total this season on the ground, and 5 touchdown runs. Deshaun Watson provides such a huge running threat that a lot of people seem to forget about Wayne Gallman, but the Tigers will definitely get him the football. And not only will they get him the football, they'll get their big-time wide receiver Artavis Scott the ball as well. 39 catches, 443 yards this year, and 4 touchdowns for him. And he's also kind of come around on some jet sweeps and run the football a little bit too. So Clemson's the type of team that will try to attack you a variety of ways and get the ball into their playmakers' hands as much as possible. Their offense hasn't necessarily hit their stride completely. I think that last weekend's game against Boston College was the closest we've seen to Clemson's offense kind of living up to expectations. Obviously, losing Mike Williams there to start the season did not help. When you lose a target like that on the outside, before the season even starts, he was supposed to be a guy that was preseason All ACC, and then to lose him just in the first week of the season with that neck injury and kind of be down for the count before you even enter the brunt of your schedule, that hurts. But Clemson has kind of made up for that admirably, and we've just seen how well they are able to perform when they are up to their potential, as we saw last weekend against Boston College. So this is a Clemson offense that can still produce. They have a ton of playmakers, and they'll find whatever means necessary to get the ball in their hands.
They do have a ton of playmakers. This program has produced about as good a wide receiver talent as anyone in the country over the past several years, with Artavis Bryant and Sammy Watkins in particular. You mentioned Mike Williams, and it's difficult to track injuries at the collegiate level, unlike the NFL, where there's a lot more information given out. But at the time that Mike Williams was hurt, it was said to be like an 8 to 10 week situation. So we'll see if we get to see Mike Williams near the end of the ACC run for Clemson. Was only able to catch 2 passes before he was hurt. You mentioned Artavis Scott, one of the best guys in the nation after the catch, has caught 39 for 4 touchdowns. Jordan Leggett, a tight end who's got immense potential and talent, has only caught 15, but 5 for touchdowns. And then a bunch of other guys, as you mentioned, filling in for Mike Williams at this point. Defensively, Grady Jarrett gone, Vic Beasley gone, who was just a beast for this team. But the Clemson defense hasn't really fallen off.
No, they haven't fallen off. And with the amount of starters that were left off of last year's team heading into this season, you thought that Clemson would take a step back on defense, but really they haven't. They're still a top 10 defensive team, number 10 on the mark right now statistically. They're giving up just over 4 yards of play. They've stopped the run. They've defended the pass well for the most part. I mean, this is a Tigers team with Mackenzie Alexander there at corner, one of the best in the country. And it seems like every week we get to see a top defensive back compete in the ACC. And this weekend will be no different. And it'll be a tough test for Mackenzie Alexander and that Clemson defense against a Miami offense that has played pretty well this season. Of course, you got Brad Kaaya quarterback, and we'll get more in depth with the Miami offense here in a second. But Clemson's defense has performed quite well this season, despite all of the losses from last year's squad. I mean, how often can you say you're going to lose a guy like Vic Beasley and still be able to stuff the run the way that they have? So I've been very impressed with the Tigers defense. They've exceeded my expectations.
Yeah, let's talk about the Canes offense. Certainly trying to keep up with the defense that is a bit leaky on the other side. Brad Kaaya, not necessarily the best quarterback for this team right now. And what I mean there is the offensive line is probably the weakness of this team. And Kaaya's had to hang in there as a pocket passer and try to deliver because of a quick release. And the kid is just exceptionally talented as a NFL prospect and having a really good season despite the issues up front.
Yeah, man, Brad Kaaya can really throw the football. Over 1,700 yards passing, 10 touchdowns this year. He's on pace to go well over 3,500 yards if this continues. The way he's thrown the ball is admirable. He's got Rashawn Scott and Stacy Coley on the outside. Those are 2 receivers that can really go up and get the ball. Rashawn Scott in particular leads the team, 33 catches, 446 yards, and 4 touchdowns on the year. They got a lot of playmakers, 4 and 5 stars across the board there on the offensive side of the football. Joseph Yearby has been able to run the ball a little bit better over the past couple of weeks. He's got 517 yards rushing on the year for the Hurricanes. But once again, this game will be a lot about whether or not the offensive line will be able to keep Brad Kaaya upright. I mean, I think if they're able to handle the Clemson pressure, which has affected so many teams throughout the course of the season thus far, if they can handle that pressure, I think Miami has a very good chance to win. And how could you not like them with the way Brad Kaaya throws the football? So they definitely have potential. They got as many playmakers as Clemson does on that side of the football. So it's all a matter of how many stops that Miami defense can get, and can Miami's offense kind of sustain the Clemson pass rush long enough to let the Miami offense, see it through and maybe make a couple big plays that could decide the football game.
Yeah, Herb Waters, also a guy that gets downfield and makes big plays for the Canes. 22 catches, over 18 yards per reception. If you look at the defense, Rashawn Jenkins and also Artie Burns with 8 combined interceptions, leading a defense that likes to take some risks in the secondary. They've been burned, especially, the Cincinnati game, they really got shredded in the defensive backfield in that one, and Everett Golson was able to make plays when they needed to, despite holding down the Seminoles for much of that game. The last few drives when Florida State needed plays, Golson was able to deliver the football. So this should be an interesting one. Your final thoughts on Miami and Florida State here?
Well, it's going to be all about Miami's defense versus the Clemson offense. And coming off of the week that they had, I keep going back to that because everybody was talking about the expectations for Clemson's offense and how high those expectations were. And Clemson has really looked like they're about to hit their stride if they're, not in the midst of doing that already. So they're very close to getting to where they want to be as an offense. And if Miami's defense can find a way to just hang tough, they are going to give up some plays just because they do take some chances on that side of the ball and try to stop some high-flying receivers and some big-time offenses in the ACC that they've played thus far. They do take a lot of chances. If they can harness that into good energy and make some good plays on the defensive side of the football, maybe turn over Deshaun Watson a time or two like Boston College did a week ago, they could have a chance to win this football game. I do like the way Miami's offense has played the last couple of weeks. I love the way Brad Kaaya throws the football. Like you said, Herb Waters, as you alluded to, he's a guy that can go make plays deep down the field. He's averaging over 17 yards per catch, like you mentioned. And, with Stacy Coley and Rashawn Scott, Miami definitely has the playmakers to hang in this game. But, with Clemson playing the way they are, they're a college football playoff contender. I'm on record as saying the ACC would not have a playoff team this year. I look like I'm going to be mistaken if Clemson has anything to do with it, because right now they look like one of the best defenses in college football, and their offense is improving. They're a team that can absolutely hang with some of the best in the country across all the conferences. So I like Clemson in this game just because I think they're one of the most well-rounded teams in the nation. Offensively, Deshaun Watson, how can you not like what he's doing right now? And he's staying on the field, which was the big question mark with all the injuries he had last year, was whether or not he would stay healthy and, be in the game long enough and not take that big hit. He hasn't taken the big hit this year. The Clemson offensive line, for the most part, has done a very good job of protecting him. So I'm going to take Clemson. Deshaun Watson's on the field. He's playing extremely well. And I don't trust the Miami offensive line against the Clemson defense. I think the pass rush has been way too good for Miami's offensive line to be able to stop. I mean, there have been less pass rushes that Miami has struggled against this season, notably against Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got an okay defense, but their pass rush is not what Clemson's is, and Cincinnati's pass rush gave Miami a ton of issues. So I'll take Clemson. I think they'll win this game by a couple touchdowns, but if Miami's able to force a turnover, I think they can hang around this game for a little while.
Yeah, I think that's the deal right there. You can look at any football game and mention a number of keys to the game, turnovers, who wins at the point of attack, et cetera, et cetera. But this one's pretty obvious in regards to Miami having any chance in this game has to protect Brad Kaaya, because they like to throw it downfield, and he needs time for those patterns to develop with Waters, Coley, and Scott in particular. Clemson and Miami, one of the more interesting interdivision games in the ACC, at close to South Beach, with the Canes at 4-2. Clemson, of course, at 6-0. Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC helping us break it down. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Mark.